Now, here's the controversial part. This is what people call, I'm not going to mince words, this is what people call the racist part of Tanya. I don't think I don't think anybody who is understanding of what it's saying would call it racist. There's nothing racial about it. It has nothing to do with race. By the way, what race is a Jew? What color is a Jew? Right? So, yeah, Jewish identity is a metaphysical identity anyway, because there's black Jews and white Jews and Jews from every nationality and ethnicity and speak every language at home and eat every cuisine and hold every passport. So, being a Jew is certainly, it's not a ethnicity or a nationality or a race in the conventional sense of the terms. It's not even a religion, because you could have a Jew who's non-practicing and they're still Jewish. So how do you define Jewish identity? It's a metaphysical condition. Now, how does a person gain that status? We know there are two ways. Either they're born from a Jewish mother or they're halakhically converted. But the point is, it's a metaphysical status. So there has to be some distinction called Jew. What is a Jew? It's not a genetic thing. It's not an ethnic thing. It's not even a religious thing, meaning what religion you practice, because you could, God forbid, practice another religion and still be a Jew, God forbid. But it's a metaphysical condition. Here, what we're talking about is somebody who has the presence of Jewish spiritual anatomy, Jewish spiritual hardwiring. And the Jewish spiritual hardwiring is that they have two souls, and one of those souls is a soul of klippa, but that klippa is klippas noiga, and therefore it has good and bad traits. He says, in contrast, ma she'ein kein nefashos umas ha'olam, the souls of the rest of humanity. Hein mishar klippas tameas she'ein bahen teiv klal, they're from the other klippas, not klippas noiga, but the other klippas which don't have any good. Now you're going to say, hold on a second, I meant non-Jews that did have good. Okay, so let's slow down. First of all, there is definitely such a thing called tzadike umas ha'olam and chaside umas ha'olam. The Rambam speaks about it in terms of halacha. So there are exceptions of very noble people who are not Jewish. What we're talking about here is a general categorical status, that to say that automatically, just by dint of their membership in this spiritual nation, which is not a real nation the way, or defies categorization of nation the way we normally use the term, but to say that this idea that someone automatically has this klippas noiga, that even their klippa is klippas noiga, that's uniquely Jewish. Of course, there are non-Jewish human beings whose klippa is also klippas noiga, but it's not by default. It's an exception. Now, you may even argue that today, in today's day and age, that the exception is more prevalent than the rule. I have no proof for that. I think people in general are kinder and more humane today than they ever were before. So I think that lawlessness and cruelty were more the rule in the past in human history. Today they're more the exception. Again, I have no proof for this. Maybe I shouldn't even be saying this, but I believe that today most of humanity, Jewish or non-Jewish, do have a certain native kindness that's just natural to them. But I don't know that that was always the case throughout history. And that's what the Alter Rebbe is speaking about. He's speaking about the fact that it's not the default. It's not the default that you can just assume that a person is a good person. At any rate, let me take another approach to explaining this. What the Alter Rebbe is saying at this point is no worse than what a humanist will say about himself. Basically, he's saying that human beings are just animals and they do what's good for them. And they don't really have the capability for altruism. What's the Alter Rebbe saying worse about human beings than any good humanistic, atheistic than any secular approach says about human nature. What he's saying is that human beings are out for themselves. And even when they do good, they're doing it because it's self-serving on some level. And self-serving could even just mean I get to feel good about myself. I'll tell you very quickly a story that actually happened to me where I learned. See, I always struggled with exactly what this means. And I told you, one of my ways of understanding it is that I do think today's day is an exception in terms of the timeline of history. I think that there's a disproportionate amount of genuinely kind human beings today more than ever. And I think it's because we're closer to Mashiach, whatever. But that's something I can't prove. That's just a personal feeling I have. But as far as understanding the words here, when the Alter Rebbe is saying that the rest of humanity, they don't have good, the default is not good. And he says, let's just continue the line here. If they do any good, it's only self-serving. Legamaru means for themselves. Or like it says in Proverbs, that when the nations, meaning when humanity does good, it's actually reckoned like a sin. Not that it's literally a sin, obviously. It's speaking homiletically here. It's not really a sin. It's chesed. It's a good thing. But it's relatively a sin. Why? Because all the goodness that they do, it's only self-serving. It's only for self-glorification. So I was struggling with that. And I had an incident. I experienced an incident that really clarified it for me. I was on a radio show, on a panel, and the topic was the Golden Rule. And the host had different clergy from different world religions. I was the rabbi representing Judaism, and they had different world religions. And so he asks, why should you do unto others as you would have them do unto you? And the first one they asked was the Muslim. They asked the imam. And he said, well, because even though it's difficult to be kind to everybody, but the reward in the afterlife is so ample that it's definitely worth it. So I don't know a lot about Islam, but from what I do know, that sounded pretty accurate. Like they picked a good guy to represent his religion. That's what they believe, that the reward, and we also believe lahavdil in the reward in the world to come, right? But so his explanation, why should you be a good person? Why? Because of paradise. Okay. Then they asked the Buddhist. The Buddhist was like, well, if you don't be good to people, you won't get away with it because there's karma and it'll even out. So what's the point of trying to get away with anything? You just gotta, don't make any waves. And I thought to myself, I don't know a lot about Buddhism, but with what little I know, it sounds like, again, they picked a pretty good Buddhist to represent Buddhism right there. Then they asked a Christian. He was some type of Protestant, I don't remember which denomination. And he's like, well, I was at a protest the other day and I was thinking this very question because I was thinking, what's the point of my being here? Am I making a difference? And I realized, well, the reason that I'm here at this protest is so I should know that I took the right stand on the issue. And that's why you should be a good person, so that you should know that you're a good person. And I was like, oh, okay. Like, again, I don't know a lot about Protestantism, but it sounds like he's probably a Calvinist, right? Some type of Presbyterian, Calvinist, whatever. I should be a good person, so I should know that I'm a good person. Again, they picked a good guy to represent his religion. The next guy was the ethical humanist. The ethical humanists have a church where they don't pray. They have a house of worship. They get together. They don't worship, though, because they're humanists. And they study philosophy and ethics, and to discuss about being a good person. So they asked him, why should you be a good person? So the ethical humanist says, well, it's very simple. If I do whatever I want to do, you'll do whatever you want to do, and there'll be anarchy. So for the preservation of society, for the greater good, everybody has to sort of hold back and defer to others. So they come to me and they ask me, what's the Jewish take? Why should you be a good person? So I was sort of like, I wanted to be amusing. I didn't want to just, say a regular answer. So I made a quip and I said, because I was listening to the previous answers, so I said, so essentially the question is, what are the self-serving motives for being selfless? Which I thought was kind of cute, like it should at least elicit a chuckle. And the guy's like, yeah, go ahead, Rabbi. But he didn't get the joke. So I broke the first rule of comedy, which is, if you bomb, don't just repeat the joke. But I did it, because I wanted him to get it. I said, so basically, you're asking what are the self-serving motives for being selfless? He's like, yeah, go ahead, Rabbi. And I just realized at that moment that we were like having two totally different discussions. And I realized these people, their self-serving motives are not disgusting self-serving. It's not like they're saying, I want to be good, I can trick people into trusting me and then I'll, rob their home. No, all of their answers were somewhat refined, some more than others, but some of them were even downright spiritual. Like they had reasons why to be a good person. The Jewish question, why should you be a good person, though, ultimately is unanswerable. What do you mean, why should you be a good person? You need a reason? Yeah. You need a reason? And it's funny because we believe in some of those things. The Muslim believes in afterlife. We also believe in afterlife. But that's why to be a good person? That's why? That's the reason? That's not the reason. So when he says that they do it for themselves, legamaihu, for themselves doesn't have to be the most brute expression of self-interest. It could just mean that, I don't know, because I want to be a moral person. Oh, you have a reason. You want to be a moral person. Okay, and so that's what he's saying. He's saying that the default is a human being will be good because they have a logical reason why to be good, or an ideological reason why to be good. It's uniquely Jewish to say, I don't know, this is just what I do. Now, are there non-Jews who could also do that? Yes, of course. What he's saying is what's unique and unusual and peculiar is that you'd have a whole nation of people whose default is that. And that's what he's saying. Oh, the radio host, whatever, he got frustrated. I got frustrated and he went to commercial break.